Welcome back, everybody. If you're new, my name's Nicholas, and this is Investing Against the Grain. We've got a little bit of a different episode for you today. We're doing an interview with Greg. Greg is a intellectual property attorney with a background in electrical engineering. He recently bought a Tesla Model Y Performance. He has FSD Beta on it, and he took a road trip from Florida to North Carolina, to Georgia, to North Carolina, back and forth for a couple weddings, and then back to Florida. So in today's episode, we're going to kind of pick his brain on the experience he had, good, bad, ugly, what he thinks, the pros and cons are overall, and how the trip went. And even more so than just FSD Beta, but also talking about supercharging and any kind of points of friction going from an ICE vehicle to a electric vehicle. Again, this has all happened essentially in the last month where he purchased it and made these trips. He just got back yesterday, so it should be pretty fresh in his mind for any pros or cons. And then, of course, we're going to talk a little bit at the end about the Tesla stock price, future valuations, and if this whole FSD Beta thing is real or if it's just hype that a lot of us Tesla investors have. And one last thing to note as I bring Greg on, he's also my best friend. We've been growing up together. We've grown up together since, I guess, about 7th, 8th grade. So we have a long history together. So Greg, welcome to the channel. I appreciate you taking the time to do this while our ladies are upstairs cooking us brunch. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything else as far as the introduction that you would like to share with the audience?
No, like you said, I did a road trip from Tampa, Florida, basically to Athens, Georgia, then Athens, Georgia to Highlands, North Carolina, which is only about a 2-hour drive from Athens, then for a wedding, and then back to Athens, and then Athens to Raleigh, North Carolina, which was like a 6-hour drive, and then Raleigh, North Carolina, back to Tampa, which is a 9.5-hour drive. So it's a little over 2,000 miles, and I did it all on FSD Beta. So it was a really interesting experience. Like you said, I've only had FSD Beta. Actually, I got it 2 days before the road trip. So really the road trip was my way of learning about FSD Beta. And I mean, I knew about it, but like what it felt like to drive with it and learning about its, any kinks that are still left in it.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, so you recently finally decided to pull the trigger on the Model Y Performance. We've talked a lot about wanting a Tesla. We've been around Teslas. We're both heavily invested into Tesla. Why now? What made you decide to finally pull that trigger?
Well, I think the Model Y was like $65,000 at the beginning of this year. And when they did the price cuts down to, essentially $50,000, it was kind of time for me to get a new car anyway. I was driving a 1996 Toyota 4Runner before that, and I was kind of waiting for the right time to buy the car that I wanted, a Tesla Model Y Performance, and it just felt like the right time.
Nice. And any reason why performance over long range?
Well, the performance, you get the extra mileage on it, of course, right? It's like 323 miles, I believe. That could be, don't quote me on that, of range. And then it also goes from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, where the Model Y standard goes from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. So my girlfriend just got the Model 3 standard, and I was able to play around with that a little bit before deciding to get the performance of the Model Y.
Nice. Yeah. And for those of you who haven't seen my little 1 a.m. random YouTube clip, I also just purchased a Model Y Performance late at night after watching some more YouTube videos. And Greg was definitely a big influence of maybe more so jealousy and knowing that it was right there, just a block away from me, and I didn't have one. It was finally enough to push me over the edge. So excited to get mine. Still waiting for the VIN number, but yeah, hopefully that jealousy subsides soon here. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, and hopefully you get the Hardware 4. I bought mine knowing Hardware 4 was coming out soon. I bought mine right before this road trip because I wanted it for the road trip, and then found out during the road trip that, from Reddit and other sources, it seems like Hardware 4 is rolling out on Model Ys starting very soon, maybe right now, it seems like.
Yeah, that was part of also the reason why I was kind of holding off, or it was one of the reasons I was telling myself in my head was Hardware 4. Then also I want to see this Project Thailand because I still think the Model 3 looks a lot sexier Like it's just more sporty, but I think it's not as functional for our day to day life. And so once like we started seeing the reports of the hardware 4 coming out, I was like, well, it seems more concrete now. I mean, we were actually texting about this while you were up at the wedding, and that's when I was like, all right, let's just do it. And I think you can look up the VIN number too to verify. So I may have to push off my purchase date, but anyways, this is neither here nor there.
Well, when I was buying my Model Y Performance, the Model Y Performance and the Model 3 Performance were the exact same price.
Mm.
And at the exact same price, it just makes sense to get the Model Y Performance. There's a lot of advantages to having a Model Y, particularly the folding back seats. If you have dogs or kids or carry around anything kind of larger, it just makes sense to get the Model Y.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So, all right, so before we talk about FSD or Tesla stock price valuation or any of that, so this road trip was the first time you've ever done a road trip in an EV. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. I drove across Florida to West Palm Beach a week beforehand. So that was, I guess, maybe my first road trip, but this was the first kind of longer road trip. Yeah.
Okay. And for people who aren't familiar, that's what, maybe like 3 hours?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was a much longer, like I think you said 2,000 miles. How was the experience with supercharging? Was it fine? Did it take longer than you thought? Was it a little annoying, kind of adding way more time to your trip? I mean, like walk us through that for people who have never really done that.
So this was the thing I was honestly most nervous about, is the long distance traveling and having access to a supercharger, or it just adding, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours onto a 7, 8 hour drive. I was worried about that. I found it to not be at all an issue. The car maps it out to what superchargers it thinks you should go to. And it gets you there when you have like 10% charge left. So you have 40, 50, whatever, 30 miles left, 10 to 20% charge left. And what I found is the first 100 to 150 miles of charge on top of your 30 miles remaining only takes about 15 minutes to charge, 15, 20 minutes to charge at a supercharger, a level 2 supercharger. And then if you wanted to stay and charge all the way up to your max capacity, the last hour or the last 100 miles takes like 40, 55 minutes, something like that to charge. So you don't charge all the way up to full charge when you stop at a supercharger. You stop to get up to about like 200 miles of range. And that gets you another hour and a half, 2 hours down the road of your drive. So you're kind of puddle hopping from one supercharger to the other, stopping every hour and a half, 2 hours of drive. I don't know about you, but I need a 15-minute break to pee and get a coffee or whatever every hour and a half, 2 hours on drive anyway. I want to make that stop, right? And some people, I was telling people this during the wedding trip that I just had, and some people were like, oh, I'd like to drive 5 hours at a time and stop. It's like, okay, well, you're gonna have to stop more than that. I don't want to drive 5 hours stop. I need to stretch my legs. So it didn't, stopping for 15 minutes every hour and a half, 2 hours was nice. And they put the superchargers usually close to something interesting. One time it was a bowling alley that had food and games and stuff. We stopped and spent an extra like 15 minutes playing games at the bowling alley. Or they'd be at Buc-ee's or some larger, like nicer gas station. A few of the times we stopped at places that were kind of like not very nice gas stations or not like the nicest places to stop. But for the most part, the superchargers were placed at locations that had some, nicer options.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like it was too much of a deterrent for you, and you were traveling with your brother Eric as well, so that makes it a little more fun as well during those stops. Yeah, we had a wedding recently in Wilmington, North Carolina. So we flew into Raleigh, ironically, where some of the weddings were that you were at, and we rented a Model 3 from Hertz. And yeah, we found the same kind of experience. I mean, we went from, it was about 2.5 hours in the Model 3. We went from Raleigh to Wilmington, and in one charge, and then we just charged when we were at Wilmington. And then coming back, I had to charge, before you return it to the rental center. We stopped at like this like shopping plaza that had chargers, and it was right next to a Chick-fil-A. By the time we went, got our order from Chick-fil-A, walked back to the car, I had to move the car because it was already done charging. It was already at 80%, and Hertz throttles it. And so I had to move the car so we could eat before we left. So it's not like it was even charged, it was already done. Right. So it was yeah, it was a pretty good experience for us on that, smaller road trip.
Yeah, the other thing that's really nice is it alerts you to your app, tells you when your car is ready, or you can go into. We stopped at a Barnes and Noble one time, charge up, excuse me, and you can check on the app to see how charged you are, and then make a decision based on that, and that's really nice.
That is nice. Yeah. So
the other thing that just kind of cut in there, the other thing that was surprising to me was I was told that you don't really save any money compared to gas when you're supercharging because you pay for the supercharging. And that was not my experience. Every time I stopped to supercharge, it was like $10 to $15. So I think the overall cost was much less than it would be driving a gas car. At least, I was driving a 96 4Runner. It's a gas guzzler. It would have been an expensive trip and 2,000 miles of gas. Charging, every 2 hours, $10 to $15, probably 3 to 4 stops, or 3 stops from Tampa to Athens. So what's that? $45 to get to Athens, Georgia on gas or electricity. It's not bad.
Yeah, we have a Nissan Rogue that it's the reason we haven't bought a Model Y because it's already paid for, right? So it's hard to take another car loan when you already have something paid off. But it gets about 315 miles to a full tank, and every time we fill up, it costs about $45 to $50. Even with these new kind of depressed prices. So yeah, I mean, assuming that you get the true range. I mean, even if you don't get the true range, right? Say if you cut that in half, it's still essentially more cost effective to go with the supercharging. So yeah, that's a great point.
Well, that's something that I learned too on these road trips that I thought was interesting is that you're not going to get true range unless you're driving 55 miles an hour, whatever the most efficient speed is on cruise control. You're not going to get the full range. I found, at least the way I drive, which is 10 miles over the speed limit, maybe more depending on the highway, whatever. I think we probably got like 60 to 70% of the range that you're told you get. But that's highway driving, at a faster speed.
Gotcha. All right, so let's move over to the real point of this video. Talk about full self-driving. So before we talk about what your experience was, you and I have driven around with the FSD around our local area here, and to your point, you finally got into the program a couple days before your actual trip. I mean, we drove together on that zero disengagement drive. But besides that, just what were your kind of preconceived ideas of FSD beta for this longer trip, right? Outside of just us going to return a pair of shoes for you, right? Like what was the mindset going into it before we talk about what the actual, real world results were?
It felt like it was mostly done for the safety of driving, in terms of the car was going to be safe operating on FSD, but some of the things would be clunky. The turns are not always smooth, turning around a corner. Yeah, I think that was kind of my mindset, that it would get me there safely. It would not necessarily get me there smoothly.
Okay. And that, that kind of aligns with what Elon's been saying, that with, and just for the audience. So you did this on 11.3.6 version.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and so what Elon's been saying is that what they've been doing is building FSD for safety, not for smoothness, and that 11.4.1.2, this is like their first kind of entry into trying to make it smooth now on top of safety, right? So we build for safety first, not smoothness, but now we're moving to a new paradigm where it's for safety and smoothness. So that aligns with essentially what Elon said, exactly how you're describing it there. And so, okay, so you were expecting it to be somewhat clunky, work good sometimes be clunky, but overall safety, you felt confident in the safety. So yeah, so walk us through, I guess, first going from Tampa, going north, that experience. From you get outside of our gate here, you double click on the stock, and how does it go from there?
So the first drive from Tampa to Athens, Georgia, nothing too interesting happened, which is a good thing, right? It found it to be very smooth. I noticed when I got to Athens, I was not as fatigued from driving 7 hours as I would have been in the past driving up there, because we have family up there and do that drive fairly often. But I did disengage the FSD a few times, and those were times that I think I did it twice that I could remember. One when I was going, FSD wanted to pass a car, and there was another car, so I got from the middle lane to the left lane, and then FSD, and then there was a car behind me on the left lane that wanted to go like 5 or 10 miles an hour faster than FSD was going. Probably it was high, I had set the max speed to be, 6 miles an hour over the speed limit, and this car wanted to go much faster. So I think I may have disengaged it there to accelerate and get past this car I was trying to pass. The other time was there was construction somewhere, and I just felt like the car probably wasn't going to handle this particular situation that well. And that was kind of my overall feeling during the entire trip. I mean, my biggest takeaway is that FSD is doing everything that is a relatively normal situation while driving really well. But it's the part that's missing right now is the human intuition about what's going to happen in the future. Like, you see a car merging over kind of in a weird way, a little more aggressive than you think somebody should merge over. And you may have to hit the brake because this car is behaving a little erratic, and you can see it in the distance being a little bit erratic and possibly coming into your lane. And then you see it coming into your lane, and you're like, okay, I need to slow down kind of quickly. There was a few situations like that where you're like, okay, this is coming. I can see it coming. It's not right in front of me. It's like 2 steps in front of me. And I want to react now before I get in a situation where I'm too close to this car or whatever. So it's kind of those really outskirts of the driving experience that FSD hasn't quite developed that intuition yet, which makes sense. Nobody expects it to be there at this point. I mean, it's astonishing what it is so far.
So when you say that it doesn't have that intuition, how far are you letting it get to those situations to see how it reacts, or were you just letting it do it, and in your mind you're saying I would have done XYZ sooner than what it did?
Yeah, that's where it is. That's where the kind of crux is. Like, I think the first one, the one from when I disengaged going from Tampa to Athens, I think there was construction on the right lane, and there was kind of a somewhat heavy traffic area, and the right lane had to merge into the left lane, and I think there might have been 3-lane road, so it was kind of a funky situation. But FSD was going to wait until the end to merge into that middle lane, where I had an opening earlier where I could merge into it and then maybe even go to the far left lane and kind of totally avoid that little bottleneck. Mm-hmm. But FSD, I did notice this throughout my trip, and merging situations, FSD waited until the very end to merge. And that would not be the optimal way through that spot.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's funny you say that about the merging because I've been watching, as you know, I watch a lot of FSD beta videos. For the main reason because every geo is a little different. So it's nice to see how it's reacting with all the little idiosyncrasies that different cities, states, etc. have. But something I've noticed is with 11.4.2, there's a lot of people who with merging, they're starting to one see the blinkers come on, and two, it's telling you on the display that it's switching lanes for merge. It's telling you what's happening. It's doing it ahead of time. But what's interesting is that Chuck Cook, who lives in Jacksonville, he went out yesterday to film a video because he heard everybody seeing all these different reactions or different ways that FSD is approaching merges. And so he went to test it to see if it would happen for him, but it didn't. It didn't happen for him. He wasn't getting the same things. So I think we learned something yesterday that I think a lot of us have suspected for a long time, that the version of FSD you have isn't necessarily the same across the board. It seems like they're testing out different little things on different pockets of people. So it seems like some people got that merge, part of the architecture. Other people aren't. And it seems like they're choosing to turn certain things on to certain people and then kind of beta testing within the beta for
I think
different
that's,
features.
I think that's right because I haven't gotten yet, what is it, 11.4.2, whatever the newest one is. I haven't gotten that yet. And I thought if I connected to Wi-Fi at my Airbnb in Raleigh, it would download overnight, but it has not. And I've been back for, 12 hours now. My car's been connected to the Wi-Fi and I still haven't gotten 11.4.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to see now how they're testing things out like this. So, okay. So you get to Athens. You said maybe two disengagements. One because you want to let someone pass, and then another one because construction zone. Just safety, right? Other than that, I mean, how did it feel when you were on it? I mean, was it more relaxing? Did it feel safe? Did it feel squirrely?
No, I felt very safe. On the highway, it is nearly perfect. I mean, the only ways that it's not nearly perfect in terms of safety, I think it's perfect on FSD on the highway. At least that was my experience. Uh, the only, I mean, the only things that felt weird were when we're inconveniencing other drivers sometimes. For example, there's an option to hit minimal lane changes to do minimal lane changes on the drive. If you don't have that option enabled, the car, I mean, I was on assertive mode, I believe. But FSD wants to change lanes more than I would prefer. And it'll be like, maybe you have your max speed set to 70 and you're in the middle lane and the car in front of you in the middle lane is going 69. And so FSD will want to get into the left lane to go 70 to like pass it at 1 mile an hour. And then there might be a car that comes up behind you going 5 miles an hour, going 75. And they're like, why is this guy going, passing this guy with 1 mile an hour speed difference? And so as the driver, you'd probably prefer to just sit in that middle lane going 69 instead of 70, even though you ultimately would prefer to go 70, than to make that small passing or that slow passing. So it was kind of, you inconvenience drivers a little bit with that type of a scenario, changing lanes a little too much, or not getting over when you're in the left lane. FSD assertive seems to want to sit in the left lane, and you would get a car behind you in the left lane that wants you to move over, and it won't move over without you hitting the stalk to put on the blinker to go over one lane to the right.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So what about the rest of your trip? I mean, I imagine there are other disengagements, right? Like you pull into the supercharging station, right? I imagine as the car pulls up, you disengage there, right? Like, talk to me about those. Did it pull in smoothly? Was that kind of jerky? How was all that?
Um, yeah, there was. So I would disengage. I typically disengage right before it's going to pull into the gas station or the parking area for where you're going to charge. That's when I would typically disengage. Um, there was there was one really interesting instance where I don't know if I disengaged it, and it would have been interesting to see how it was, but I was on, I was driving and I needed to I pulled off the highway. I'm on a street that's, 2 or 3 lanes in one direction, 2 or 3 lanes in the other direction with a median in the middle. And I need to get into that median and take a left. But there was a car already kind of waiting to take a left where I needed to take a left. And there was a car in front of it that needed to take a left from its side, but it was coming in the other direction. So basically, the car needed to figure out a way to take a left, to get into the median to take a left when there was 2 cars already in that median, both trying to turn in different directions, both trying to take a left, but both from different directions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so they're essentially facing each other to take lefts to kind of go like that, and then
Yeah.
you're over here waiting to get into the median.
Yeah. And so I disengaged it and got into like kind of squeezed into the left lane myself. I don't think FSD could have done that, but that's what I mean by it's just the very fringe activity that you do in a car that really takes some human intuition that I still don't feel comfortable with FSD. And those are the only times I really didn't feel comfortable with FSD driving the car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm understanding you correctly, which I think I am, yeah, we've actually seen FSD handle that with Chuck's unprotected left, but that's again a unprotected left that he's testing out over and over and over. So when the situation arises, he's kind of comfortable doing it because he's had so many iterations on it. Whereas you're on a road trip, you're trying to get somewhere. You're not in test mode, right? So yeah. So your brother was driving with you in the passenger side. What was his take about FSD from a few different perspectives? From first of all, the comfort of it, like was it noticeable? Was he kind of like, oh crap, what just happened? And was he impressed at all?
So that's funny when he
And
drove up.
sorry, just real quick, just background. So, and Eric he is an electrical engineer as well. So, he's a little more technical. I actually invited him to be on this interview today, but much as just like any other engineer, he didn't want to speak too much on the topic until he learned more about it. And so he's kind of deep diving right now into AI, AGI, etc. So, but with that background, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is funny, and I think this is kind of a good sign. So when I started, when we got on the road trip and I engaged FSD, I'm like, why aren't you more impressed about this? It's like you seem kind of muted about the experience. And he's like, well, I have high expectations for FSD. He believes in it, I guess. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. But he said he has high expectations, whatever that means. And so I was kind of surprised he wasn't that impressed because I was. And so once we got to Raleigh, so this is like 7 days into the trip, and we had driven 1,500 miles in FSD at this point. I let him try FSD around town in Raleigh, and he became much more animated when he tried it for himself because you feel a steering wheel moving under your hands, like you feel you have your feet up, not on the accelerator, not on the brake. You kind of have them kind of away from the pedals, and you feel the haptic feedback of the car, kind of, or the haptics of the car. You feel it moving without you controlling it. So I think for the passenger, when they see it the first time, if they close their eyes, it would feel like just a car driving. So it's like, why are you not impressed? It's because it feels like a car driving. Whenever you're in the driver's seat, you feel haptically the car driving itself. and it's much more impressive sensation than if you're just driving a car, which I mean, I would say that's a compliment to FSD. You don't want the passenger to feel like it's doing something that it shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's like if you're driving and I'm in the passenger seat, well, that feels no different than an Uber or whatever. Like, what's there to be impressed? Yeah, you're saying you're saying that it's driving itself, and it is, but my sensation is no different. It's the
Yeah.
exact same. But when you're behind the wheel, to your point, you can feel the steering wheel jerking. You can feel the brakes. You're aware that you're not on the accelerator or on the brake pedal. And then on top of that, like when it's creeping out for certain things or whatever, you get the sense that you understand that the vehicle's thinking about what to do next. Like you can almost feel the essence of that. And I think that's where like a lot of people with their Teslas it's become more of it's humanized the vehicles more, because it's literally like you can feel it thinking, and maybe it doesn't think the right thing, but you can almost kind of understand like where it's making its mistakes, because you're smarter than it and you understand what the right move is, but you can see it learning over time. So yeah, so I definitely understand that perspective. But okay, so he's behind the wheel, he's feeling everything. Well, what's his? And you say he's more animated, but what was his? What were those animations? What was his reaction? Did he? I imagine there's like a smile or like a whole, just in general. But what were his thoughts afterwards?
I mean, he was just, he thought it was really cool. I mean, I don't know how to describe it than that, but he had one disengagement, and it was, we were going around a roundabout, and the roundabout, it was a 2-lane roundabout, so you have 1-lane roundabouts and you have 2-lane roundabouts. Maybe there's bigger, but the car went it like split the 2 lanes of the roundabout getting into the roundabout. So it was like in the middle of the 2 lanes, which was kind of weird. That was a mistake on FSD's part. And then there was a semi truck going around the roundabout. So one thing I noticed about FSD is it's really careful around semis. Like it'll move more to the right. Usually the car's in the center.
You give it room.
But for larger vehicles, it'll hug the right side of the car if there's a semi truck on the lane to your left. And so anyway, this semi truck was going around the roundabout, and it was definitely cautious, and he had to give it a little gas after the roundabout, or a little acceleration,
electrons,
once the semi truck went through the roundabout, or past us anyway. And so, I mean, his experience was just that it was really cool. I think he was just as impressed by the car itself as he was with FSD. Because when I also let him drive on the way back from Raleigh to Tampa for 2 hours. And it was interesting. He was on FSD for a while, and he thought it was really interesting. And then the situation happened. Oh, I wasn't telling you about it. So FSD was in the left lane and wanted to merge into the middle lane. But the exact same time, there was a semi truck on the right lane merging into the middle lane. And this is a situation where anybody would be like getting over to the middle lane and then realize, oh shit, there's a car 2 lanes away from me that's also getting the same lane, the exact same spot as me, and do this and go back to the lane. So Eric took control of the car, went back into the lane that we were originally in, which is what he should have done. But what's interesting is FSD was no longer available for the drive after that happened. And I don't know why that happened. He was, on a Tesla, you can set a driver profile. And I was driving on my profile, but I set him up for a guest profile so we could change the mirrors and the seat position. And, if you can lose your access to FSD, if the car kicks you off, if FSD kicks you off of FSD like several times in a row, you lose access for 2 weeks or whatever. But it was strange when he took control of the car in that situation. And it was probably a more aggressive taking control of the car, right? It was going to the right, and you had to grab the wheel and go back to the left a little bit. it kicked him off of FSD for the rest of the drive for the next 45 minutes. And so I thought that was really strange, and I don't have an answer for why it kicked him off. I don't know if it was because, maybe FSD takes account of the fact that I, on my user profile, had driven FSD for 1,500 miles and would take control of the car every once in a while, can build experience points in FSD because it was on a guest profile and he was a new driver. Maybe it was like, okay, this guy's taking control of the car. He's a new driver. Maybe he, will kick him off for the rest of the drive. I don't know. Maybe you have a better understanding or guess on why FSD was no longer available for that drive.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there could be a couple anomalies. It could have been like I wonder, like, was he definitely on FSD? Because sometimes you kick it out yourself, and then it's just in autopilot.
No, it was definitely on FSD. We went to FSD was no longer available. When FSD is available, whenever there's an indicator kind of on the top left of your screen that has a wheel, and the wheel wasn't there, and we went into autopilot on the settings on the dashboard, and it was all grayed out. So yeah, it was just not available for the rest of the drive. Cruise control was still available, but FSD was not.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I've never heard of that type of situation.
Neither
So,
have I. It was weird.
okay, so you went up there to Raleigh, back to Athens, etc. Came back down. What are your thoughts now on FSD, at least the version that you're on, which is still 11.3.6? Is it a parlor trick? Is it a convenience? Is it something you think you would use on your day to day, maybe only on long road trips? Like, where's the utility, if there is one, for your day to day life?
Yeah. Well, it makes me really happy as an investor.
Oh, we'll get to that. We'll get to that as an
No, but I
investor.
mean, my opinion of it makes me happy as an investor. I know how difficult of a problem it is to solve, and you still almost have a hard time believing that it can correctly behave in all driving circumstances. Like some of the ones I described where two cars are merging into the same lane together, or you have to turn left into a median, and there's two cars facing in opposite directions. And it's just a situation that happens one out of every million times you're in the car, right? Maybe not that rare, but it's hard to believe that it will be able to do everything correct all of the time. But it is astonishing right now that it is doing 99.7% of everything correctly. I have I have total faith that my car could drive to Athens and then come back to me in one piece without any scratches or dents in it or having, or causing accidents. It may inconvenience some drivers. Like if I could just send it off to go for that drive and come back tomorrow, it could do it by itself. I have no hesitations about that. So I just think it's absolutely amazing what it can do, and I think it's almost there. Like it seems like it's almost there. At least for most situations, it's almost there.
So you didn't buy FSD outright, right? You almost did, and then you decided to go with the subscription.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: knowing what you know now, do you plan on continuing to keep the $200 subscription, or is it something you'll only subscribe if you're going to take a road trip?
Probably just road trips. But I work from home. So I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area before I moved to Florida, and I commuted an hour each way. If I commuted an hour each way, I would definitely subscribe or buy FSD Beta. But if you're not driving too much, I don't know if it makes sense. I mean, the experience is really cool and it's very novel and it's worth it. But the autopilot just itself that comes with the car is pretty amazing too. I mean, it does most of the highway stuff. So I don't know.
So, all right, You say that, but let me ask you this. 11.4.2 comes out, and let's say .3 is new branch, even wider, and has XYZ new abilities. Do you think you get curious about it and you end up subscribing for another $200 just to test that out and geek out on it?
Probably. I think. I mean, okay. I'm just thinking now, kind of revising my thoughts. If even if you were driving an hour each way to work, most of that's going to be on the highway, and the autopilot is so good that if you're in traffic, it'll keep you, at the speed you want. It'll keep you a distance from other cars. It'll keep you in your lane during turns and stuff. That's really the most of the utility of FSD right now. Driving through neighborhoods and stuff. I mean, most people, that's not exhausting
Sure.
activity,
Yeah.
right? But so is $15,000 worth that extra utility? Not for the everyday person. For the enthusiast, it is. But if you can, we live in Pinellas County, Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, there's no parking at the beaches, right? If I can drive my car to the beach and then send it home and then come get me later, that's worth some money to me, right?
Yeah.
If I can go send my car out to work for me for 5 or 6 hours and make $300, that's worth paying $15,000 for that or subscribing for that. There's situations like that make it, the utility really goes up when it's totally a robotaxi or can drive by itself. If I can, my parents watch my dog whenever I'm going out of town and they're 3 hours away. If I can send my dog to my parents' house and then drive back to me, that's worth it to me, because that takes me half a day. And so there's utility like that where if robotaxi becomes a viable solution, and it, based on my experience, it seems like it is. Like I said, the car's pretty damn good on the highway, pretty good everywhere except for these rare circumstances. That's a lot of utility.
Yeah. Could you imagine that, where you need to go on a work trip, you need to go to Chicago or New York or wherever, and you need to send Cooper over to your parents' house or wherever. You get in your Tesla, you have it drive you to the airport. From the airport, Cooper's in there. It drives from the airport to your parents' house. And then whenever you're coming home, it comes back with Cooper in it to pick you up. And let's say it's delayed. Let's say your flight's delayed. Well, then it just hangs out in the cell phone parking lot with dog mode on. Like that's and I agree with you about the beach access, because the beaches we like to go to, it's normally like kind of private beaches where there isn't parking lot there. So you're kind of risking getting a ticket or getting towed. And yeah, so that'd be really convenient to be able to drop us off, go, even going out at night, yeah, we walk everywhere here because we live in downtown, but sometimes you don't want to walk. Sometimes you're like, you know what? I just want to be able to go out at the last minute. Can I just get in my Tesla? It dropped me off and then it goes back to the house. Like that'd be really nice.
Or preventing DUIs. Or if you're doing a long trip, if you could go overnight and sleep in your car while it's driving, like those utility jumps are, gain of utility jumps, let's say, make the software invaluable. Just as like a drive, for you, is that worth, $15,000? Not for the average person. But, I think it would be massively valuable when it becomes totally autonomous.
Okay. So what do you think it has left to solve to get to that stage? Like just from your experience or even high level, even other things, but like if you had to like list off like some high level stuff, what's it have to solve in order to become autonomous?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, some of it would be the last 100 feet of every drive, or last
Parking
1,000 feet of
lots.
every drive, parking lots. parking in particular areas where you could park, without getting a ticket, or you can park with getting a ticket. The rest of it, it can really do. The rest of it can really do. There are circumstances though where it's not available, where FSD is not available. And that could be in heavy rain. I've gotten several notifications where it said one or more cameras is blocked by debris or rain or whatever. And sometimes FSD will still operate with that happening, but sometimes it'll say FSD is not available. When I was Highlands, North Carolina is up in the mountains of North Carolina, and the roads are windy and narrow. On the drive up there, when I had FSD engaged, it never kicked me off FSD because the roads are too narrow or windy. I actually took it off FSD whenever the roads got too narrow for my comfort or too windy for my comfort, or I just wanted to drive a little bit more aggressively around the turns. But when I was actually up there in the mountains, FSD was often not available because the roads were too, I believe, it doesn't give you a reason, but I believe it's because the roads were too narrow or windy. And you would literally see the little steering wheel that indicates that FSD is available. It would blink on, then blink off, blink on, then blink off, blink on, then blink off. And I think what it was doing is it was seeing how narrow the road was, or how windy the road was, and it would say not available, then available when it was straight again, then not available and available again. So it can't yet, or is not comfortable yet handling narrow, windy roads, or in rainy or other difficult situations, probably weather conditions.
Yeah. My list is, I think, obviously parking lots, it needs to be able to solve that well, right? And mind you, like they haven't really worked on that part yet. Although with 11.4.2, you're seeing actually some improvements on it. I don't know if it's because they're working on it or just a byproduct of all the other improvements, but parking lots are a big one. And I would even extend parking lots to, it needs to be able to like approach our gates, let the gate open, go through the gate, open our garage door, park in our garage, right? Which I don't think that should be that hard of a problem considering everything they've done. So I think parking lots as a whole, it needs to work better on, it needs to have more of a comprehensive ability to read street signs, right? And I think that's a big deal because that leads into construction zones, because sometimes a construction zone will just have, some random cones and it'll say road closed, but part of the street is still open. And so I've seen where FSD beta will sometimes try to just go around the obstruction. So it needs to be able to have within its network to understand. And I think that's part of why they're hiring a LLM engineer right now, but it needs to be able to understand those things, right? So again, I think that's low hanging fruit. I think that's why they haven't worked on it too much. What you're talking about before on the highway with kind of the jockeying with other cars coming and stuff, I think FSD beta needs to get to a point where you're not sitting there adjusting the speed, right? It needs to understand, hey, look how fast these vehicles are moving compared to my relative speed. I need to move with traffic, right? And also understand, hey, this car's coming up quickly behind me. Let me get out of this lane, let them pass. If I want, I can go back, or I can just get out of the fast lane. Like I'm a person that never minds being in the fast lane as long as no one's coming up behind me. But if someone is, all right, I'll move out of it.
Yeah, it's unclear what it's seeing and what it's not seeing when you're driving. What I mean by that is when you're on the highway, it shows, cars 2 or 3 ahead of you, but it's unclear whether it can see the car. If there's no other cars around you, but there's a car that's merging into your lane 100 feet in front of you, if it's seeing that and it's acting accordingly or not, because it's not on the screen yet, you know? And so sometimes it doesn't react to that stuff until it gets kind of closer. And one example is we were driving on this small 1-lane road, and there was a road that kind of came off to the side and then merged into it. And I could see this car was was coming from the side on that road and was going to merge into our road, and they were driving pretty fast, I thought. And I said to my brother Eric, I was like, FSD is going to slam on the brake whenever this thing gets into our lane, because it was going to merge into our lane. It was here. There you go. Okay. It was going to merge into our lane in front of us, and I could see it was going to be totally fine. But I had a suspicion that FSD wasn't going to know that it was merging into our lane like 2 cars in front of us. I mean, it was just us on the road. So like, say, instead of saying 2 cars, let me say it was going to merge into our lane 50 feet in front of us. But I could see it coming from the side very quickly, and it was going to merge in front of us. And then when it did merge in front of us, FSD slammed on the brake. And so it seemed like it didn't realize that car was coming until much later than I saw with my eyes that it was coming.
Yeah, so I have a theory on that, which could be completely wrong. I think FSD is seeing all that and understanding what's happening, but there's a certain offset that you set to keep a certain distance away from a vehicle. And I think when situations like that happens, the car is reacting to the fact that isn't maintaining that distance away, and it jerks quickly to get that. I don't think it's jerking specifically because the car's coming over, because it sees it. It sees it miles before, or well, not miles, but it sees it with all the cameras before it happened. But I could be wrong. It could be just, a reaction and a delay. But seeing this is a big misconception that I see a lot on YouTube. But there's only so much compute, there's only so much memory, there's only so much storage in the FSD computers for hardware 3, which is what just about all cars are on right now. And so Tesla has to be very selective on what I don't want to say waste, but what they choose to visualize on the screen for the users. So for example, it'll slow down for speed bumps, but it's not visualizing speed bumps, right? So, that's just proof right there that it sees things that's not visualizing, because visualizing is a high compute and memory and storage cost. And so you have to be very selective on what you're displaying with the older hardware.
So I haven't tested it on speed bumps yet. Whenever there's I come up to a speed bump, I take it off FSD. It may be that it slows down for speed bumps, but it does it later than I would do.
Yeah.
And so I take it off FSD every time there's a speed bump.
I would say that's a pretty consistent a reaction. And sometimes people also think it doesn't slow down enough. So normally it goes down to 17 to 15 miles per hour. I don't know, actually. I think I go slower than that. I normally go pretty slow over speed bumps, just to make it smooth.
Yeah, especially with the performance tires. They're low profile tires, and I don't want to either bottom out or risk damaging the tires. But
yeah.
But so on kind of on that note of it, like doing things too abruptly, actually on the signs, you're talking about street signs. I was really impressed. There was several signs that would be like, FSD can read a street sign, 55 miles an hour. There was some signs on these more rural roads that we were on where it would be like a big triangular sign that said like coming up, and then inside the triangular sign is a speed marker sign that says like coming up 55 mile an hour speed limit. But it would be an actual speed limit sign inside this triangular orange sign. So if FSD was just looking for the speed sign, it would have seen it inside of that triangular sign and reacted accordingly. But it didn't, which it shouldn't, right? It shouldn't react to that speed limit sign until the actual speed limit sign comes up. But I was impressed that it wasn't confused by this warning sign.
Yeah. So this is what so this was happening in that situation. It's not actually reading the sign, right? It's understanding the image, if that makes any sense.
Well, that's why I thought it would have been confused.
Yeah, no, I get that, but it's been trained to see that same type of sign millions of times, so it recognizes what that sign means.
I know, that's why I thought it would have been confused.
Because it recognized that sign?
Yeah, because it's the actual speed limit sign inside of the yellow.
But that's what I'm saying. It has seen that type of sign
with the orange yellow.
Yes. it's been trained on those images, millions and millions of times.
Yeah, probably.
What it's not doing yet is actually reading. It's
Yeah.
not reading yet. It doesn't, like, if you gave it a sign that says 53 miles per hour, it wouldn't understand that's 53,
Yeah.
right? Because it's trained on images right now. And that's where this next level is going to come out. And I think they're starting on doing this right now. We've been able to see in some of the source code where it's starting to learn how to read, right? They're starting to introduce that part into it, where if a sign, like an electronic sign, right, it might say all different kinds of things, even a roadwork sign, right, to be able to understand what it's saying. So that I think is going to be a big part of this next level that they have to get to. So we're almost at an hour, so I just want to kind of wrap things up a little bit here with a few other things. So maybe we can do this a little more rapid fire. So right now we are in June. We're in June of 2023. Based on, you've tested FSD beta and other iterations, and you'll get more experience with it now. But as of today, June 4th, what does Greg think? When does Greg think we get to FSD going from beta to FSD can drive itself without any nags or anything, and you can just let it do its thing?
I don't know. That's a hard prediction. I feel like it's a long tail problem, right? It's just further and further refining. The last 1% is probably as hard as the 99% before it. But like I think right now, I mean, I would feel comfortable sending my car off somewhere and coming back. I think it might inconvenience somebody at some point, but it's not going to crash into them. So, I mean, I think it's just about when Tesla feels comfortable releasing it out into the world without drivers in it.
So,
right?
but let's put a date on. Let's just play a game with me. So put a date on when you think, or a year.
So I certainly think that if they wanted to, they could do it by the end of the year.
Okay, so your most optimistic case is end of this year.
Yeah, because a year ago, you and I rented a car with FSD and we're playing around with it, and I almost ran into a bunch of cones, and I had to slam on the brakes pretty hard. And so it's I mean, it's a night and day difference from a year ago, certainly. So in another 6-7 months, I mean, yeah, I mean, it seems to me, I'm not no expert. It seems to me like we're in the last inning of getting this thing ready to be released widely to the public.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I appreciate your sticking your neck out on a prediction there. Yeah, I think it'll be at the end of this year, maybe first quarter of next year. I think we'll be there. What do you think? Do you think the Tesla stock price has any reflection on FSD right now? Do you think there's any of that priced into it?
No, I don't think so. I think the market is focused on car models and car volume. I think, the last time that the stock really ran up incredibly was in response to the Model Y and its mass production and its sales. And so I think the Cybertruck hits the ground running, and it's as cool as everybody talks about it, I think that has more of an impact on the stock price than FSD does right now. I don't think anybody really appreciates where it is right now, except for the people that are beta testing it. So no, I don't think it's baked into the stock price.
Okay, so people still see it just as a car company, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
What do you think it'll take to get to this kind of let's say Chat GPT moment where all of a sudden just kind of goes viral and everyone understands it? What do you think it'll take to get FSD that type of popularity, recognition, or this kind of enthusiasm about it?
I think it needs a catalyst. Right now, and this is, I think, where it probably should be like this. Nobody really knows about FSD. All of my family that either they have Teslas, they don't know anything about FSD. They've never seen it. They've never ridden in it. And even if they rode in it, like we were talking about earlier, they wouldn't be impressed with it because they don't know what's going on. Somebody's not actually driving the car. I don't think it's until like some major celebrity like has this viral video of him driving FSD or something like that, some big catalyst that's going to make it explode into the news where suddenly everybody's going to want it. I think you're going to need some type of catalyst like that. And maybe it's advertising. I don't know. I don't think FSD is the best route for advertising just yet for Tesla. I think car safety is probably the better bet for advertising. But I think we're going to need some catalyst moment.
Yeah. Tesla Herbert and I have talked about this, and we're both of the same mindset. We think the moment that'll happen will be when it's a regular occurrence where you go to the supermarket or wherever, and you have the car just drop you off at the front, and then it just goes parks itself, and it does it so well, so efficiently. It's gonna be like silly to think like, why are we going to a parking lot? Like just get out, and like, this is insane.
I think, yeah, you need other people to be able to see what's happening. And so if you could see somebody's car dropping them off and then driving away, you'd be like,
yeah.
You'd ask the person, what was that? You're like, oh yeah, my Tesla drops me off because it parks for itself. And they're like, what? And they go home and they tell their husband, and their husband is like, what? And then they talk to their friends about it, and it's just going to be like something like that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I think the same thing. Okay, cool. So I had one other question for you, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But let's just wrap this up with this. Any regrets on going with Tesla? Any doubts as an investor? Just high level car regrets, stock investor sentiments. Go.
No, from the car purchasing standpoint. I mean, I describe it as like, I don't think you're driving a car. I think you're like piloting a spaceship. It's just, there's just so many things that make it so convenient and so nice to drive. Everything from, I have a dog, from dog mode to being able to access your car in your app and seeing what the charge is, or using the camera, or Sentry mode, making you can know if somebody's messing with your car. If somebody does, you'd be able to see it. From leaving your house with a full charge every day, to the crazy acceleration, to just being a beautiful car. There's just so many things about it that are more convenient that you're like, actually, I'm sorry. The best thing is never having to carry around keys. I freaking hate carrying around keys. I don't know why we have these metal pointy things in our pockets in 2023. It makes no sense to me. We got rid of it on doors years ago. And I remember like years ago being like, why can't we just have Bluetooth from our phones to open up our car door? And it took like 10 years before Tesla started doing it. And now still nobody's doing it. It's like, why do we have keys? It makes no sense. So really, not having keys and just walking up to my car, getting in and driving away is probably my favorite part of having a Tesla. So no regrets at all. I'm buying the Tesla, especially it's so competitively priced now. FSD, like I said, I subscribe to it, so I probably will unsubscribe at some point after I've gotten my, the novelty of it wears off and I don't need it. I work from home. But it's no regrets. I think it's a just really incredible machine.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to my wife the other day, to Anna, and I was telling her, like, I use Apple Pay everywhere now. It's and to your point, it's what I'm excited about the Tesla. Like, now I can just literally go everywhere with just my phone. The only annoying thing is that you still have to carry your ID. I wish we could just incorporate our ID into our phones, and anywhere you go, if you need to show ID, you can just scan it, a QR code or whatever. It's just silly to me that I still have to carry an ID. But government's always slow. All right, so what about as an investor? Are you same, moderate, less bullish, more bullish, excited to be an investor? Where are you at with that?
More bullish recently. I mean, the stock's done great the last 2 weeks or so. I have zero concerns about Tesla itself. The overall economy and stuff has been concerning for the last 2 years. But yeah, I mean, Tesla as a company is just firing on all cylinders, and it's hopefully it'll be really great to be an investor in Tesla and have been an investor in Tesla in 10 years from now, whenever all the S curves are fully ramped up, it'll hopefully be wonderful.
I love it. Let's leave it on that note. Greg, thanks again for taking the time. I know you've only been back for about 12 hours, and we've got the ladies upstairs making us some great breakfast. Hopefully they started. But yeah, thanks again for taking the time out of your day and, kind of giving us a different perspective of someone who just got a Tesla, just got FSD, and just made this 2,000-mile road trip. So again, appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers, Greg.